Welcome to No Excuses and welcome to my yard. There is construction pretty much three sides of us. And so there it is. But it is February. It is 60 degrees in Pennsylvania and I want to be outside, so I'm taking you with me. So pardon the construction noise. Today is one of my favorite videos. I'm going to talk about what I read this week. I actually read a fair amount of books this week. Some of them were just really light. About halfway through the week, I was just like, I couldn't do with anything heavy. I couldn't do with anything deep. I had enough of that going on inside me. And I wanted something lighthearted. So I just ended up turning to Danielle Steele, who's always a good bet because her books always end happy. The people always find love. It is what it is. So without further ado, let me talk about what I read. The first book I read was called The Berlin Sisters. This is a book about two sisters who live in Berlin during the war. Their father is a high-ranking German officer. And the youngest sister finds out early on in the book that while her father is a high-ranking German officer and her sister is this and that, they are actually part of the resistance. And she struggles with this because this girl had bought into all the ideology of Hitler. And the book goes through her changes and her adjustments as she learns about her family and what they're doing behind the scenes and all kinds of other things. And you know, there is running for their life as the German officers figure it out. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening. It's a really good book. It actually, talks about the fact that there were good German officers that did not believe in everything. Just because they were a German officer did not mean that they were bad. Good book. Typical World War II things happen in the book, but it was a good book because, like I said, it opens your eyes to the fact that so often we're just like the German soldiers, the German officers, they were horrible. But no, they weren't. They were a lot of times people that were sucked into something that they really were powerless to do anything against. And the only thing they could do was behind the scenes. So really good. It was a fiction. I would rank it as a high 3. It was pretty solid. The next book I read was a book called The Blue Castle. This is by L.M. Montgomery. You would know her as the author of Anne of Green Gables, which are amazing books, but I read The Blue Castle, and this is about a lady who is in her 20s, and she's a spinster. She is not married. No one has ever given her a second look. Her family has put her down all her life and put everybody else in front of her, even down to like her toys. She had toys when she was young. And if one of her cousins wanted the toy, she was made to give it to them. And so she was put down, she was put in a corner, she was put in a box. She was not allowed to say what she wanted to say, do what she wanted to do, and she was not married and still living with her mother, and her mother was not treating her very kindly. And so she gets a death sentence where she finds out that most likely she's not going to live very long. And it opens her eyes and she decides that she wants to live her life. She might not have a long time left, but she wants to live it to the fullest. And it is very humorous to find out how she did it. It was just, comments that she made, things that she did, how she lived. It was actually just kind of fun. So it was just a really good, lighthearted book. Ends happy, you feel good. It's just a good book. It's about this point in time in the week that my emotions and my internal struggles got to me, and I tried to start book after book of more serious books, more in-depth books, and I'm just like, I can't do it. So I turned to good old Danielle Steele, because if you've read one of her books, you've kind of read them all, with minor things. I mean, it's almost always about a rich person who never has any problems and they're living comfortably. It's always about either somebody that either loses love or has never had love. It's always about they lose the love, they lose this, they lose that, they lose that love, and they rediscover love again, either with the same person or not, but they always end happy. And that's what I needed this week. So I read 3 Danielle Steeles. The first one I read was called Joy. Joy is about a young girl who finds herself through circumstances alone. Her father is an absentee father. Her mother abandoned her. She was put to live with grandparents who really didn't want her. When they died, she was put into boarding schools. She was just abandoned all her life. She never got bitter. She was just the sweetest little thing. She was kind-hearted, gentle, wonderful. And you're like, would that really be possible with the life that she had? But, And it talks about her going through her life with this absence of family and with this absence of love from her life. And of course, the same old thing happens. She meets, she falls in love, she loses, she falls in love, you know, this whole same story. This is probably the favorite one that I read this week of hers. The next one I read was Resurrection. This is probably the least favorite of the three that I read. This is a book about a couple who was a power couple. She was very successful in her business. He was very successful in his business, and they're doing everything, and their lives were busy, and they were traveling here and international travel and all of that stuff. And she decides to go and surprise her husband on one of his work trips because they hadn't seen each other in a while. So she shows up and she finds out that he was not alone. And, you know, of course, her heart is broken. In the midst of this book, a resurgence of COVID, or as she called it, C25 or C225, and she gets locked down while she's in Paris. So a lot of the time her recovery is spent in a lockdown situation. You know, and of course, typical things happen, and she falls, and she does find love, and she does find happiness, and you know, things are good for her at the end, which is just kind of what Danielle Steele books are. You feel good at the end. But this was my least favorite of the three. I think most likely because I really didn't want to relive another lockdown. You know, I don't know. Maybe it was just too close to home because we've already lived it. I don't know, but that was my least favorite of them, I think. The last book that I read was called Triangle, and this is also by Danielle Steele. And this book is one about a lady. She had never married. She was happy in her own life. She had just never found the perfect man. She was a very, very successful art gallery owner. And she met Mr. Perfect. And Mr. Perfect was a very, very successful book publisher. And they were both doing the same thing, but just in different genres. And they were meshed perfectly. Everything was good. She was there, and at the 1 month mark, she found out that he was married. He swore, we live separate lives. We should have divorced a while back. We never see each other, blah, blah, blah. She was afraid to take the steps. And of course, her heart was broken. Do you see the common thread here? And things happen, and by the end of the book, she feels good. I'm not going to tell you what happened because then you're not going to want to read the book, and the book is good. But, you know, it does. Love always conquers in Danielle Steele's. Whether it's with the original person that broke her heart in the first place or with somebody new, love always conquers. So those are the books that I read. I actually just realized that I told you that the first book I ranked as a high 3. The Blue Castle, that's a 4. And the Danielle Steele's, they're solid 3s. Just solid the whole way through. But those are the books I read. If you've read any, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think. And in the meantime, keep reading. No excuses.